years. Have any idea how long that's been?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Still here.
We're still here. Do you guys remember your first broken heart? I remember when I was in 7th grade, I was dating this girl named Jamie. And it was getting pretty serious. We've been dating for a while. Been about 3 whole weeks. It's getting pretty serious. Yeah. And then she dumped me. She dumped me for someone taller. It'd be a repeated theme in my life. But man, I remember just being so devastated by it. It really just wrecked me. It destroyed me. But I mean, in reality, it wasn't really that big of a deal, right? I mean, I was in 7th grade. I got over it. It wasn't a big deal. But let me ask you another question. Do you remember the first time that you experienced brokenness or loss, real brokenness? Do you remember the first time you experienced death, loss? Do you remember receiving that bad news and just wishing it wasn't true? I remember when my mom and dad sat my sister and I down in the living room, and my dad told me that he had cancer. I cried a lot that day. That's rough. Thankfully, he got the surgery he needed, and he recovered, and he's all well and better today. But sometimes we don't get that lucky. I remember the first time that I really experienced death was whenever I was in middle school and my grandfather died. It was the first time that I had ever experienced anything like that, and what it felt like to lose someone I cared about. My grandfather had a heart attack and was put into a coma to try to help preserve him and keep him alive just a little bit longer, but I mean, death was inevitable. And they say that whenever you're in a coma, you can still hear things and kind of comprehend, what's being said and who's talking. So I remember my mom handed me the phone, and she said, "It's your grandpa, he's on the phone." And I talked to him, and I gave him my last words. And then afterwards, I just was overcome with emotion. I just cried. And I didn't even really know why. I didn't really understand why. But it was so hard to lose someone that you really cared about. There's another kind of brokenness, though, that a lot of us are not willing to talk openly about. But hidden deep down inside all of us is a brokenness over our personal failures in life. Some call it shame, other people call it guilt, but the Bible calls it sin. And in the moments in our lives when we will allow ourselves to be honest, to look deep into our souls and examine our thoughts and actions and motives, the mourning that we experience can be even more overwhelming than being told that you have cancer. It can be. Last week we began our series called The Upside Down Kingdom, where we are walking through the Sermon on the Mount and seeking what Jesus has to say about finding happiness. How can we find true happiness in the world? And he explains to us this new kind of kingdom that is different than this world, the right-side-up kingdom. And in the beginning of Matthew chapter 5, Jesus walks through what is often called the Beatitudes. He goes down a list, and one by one he tells us all these inner attitudes that we're supposed to have that will bring us happiness. And last week we looked at the phrase blessed, or if you remember, blessed can also be happy. Happy are the poor in spirit. And this week we will look at another slightly confusing sentence, another slightly confusing inner attitude that Jesus tells us we should have. Matthew 5 verse 4 says, "Blessed or happy are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Now that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you first look at it. How can you be happy when you're sad? How can you be happy when you're mourning, when you've lost something? I don't get it. I found out this week that there are 9 different words in the Greek language that can be used to describe grief. And the one that Jesus uses here for mourn is the most severe, the strongest of the 9 of them. It is when your whole body shakes and you cry from deep within your soul. It's the worst kind. And what Jesus is saying is even those that are this broken in life, those who experience this kind of grief and mourning, they're the ones that will truly be happy. They will be truly happy. The people in Jesus' audience knew a lot about mourning. It was a part of their everyday life. They didn't have the benefit of technology and modern medicine. As a matter of fact, the average age of people in that day was just a little bit over 30. imagine the amount of loss that they would experience over the course of their lifetime. It was difficult. What Jesus was saying with this second saying to those people out on the hillside, to those of us in the room today, is I know some of you are so overwhelmed with grief and sadness right now, but that mourning that you feel over a broken heart, over a personal loss, over a medical diagnosis, over a sin in your life, that brokenness can put you back on a path to true happiness forever. You can. So today, the first thing I want to talk about is, what do we do with other people that are mourning? What do we do about that? How are we supposed to react when someone else is in this tough situation, when they're mourning? How should we treat them? And I think a great place to look at that is John chapter 11. So if you want to flip there in your Bibles, we'll be there for a little bit. This story is the raising of Lazarus. And if you turn there, in our story we'll see, we can learn how best to comfort those who are mourning. I think it provides some really great insight. So John chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. Read, now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now the word sick here that he uses isn't just a normal word for sick. He doesn't just have the sniffles. He doesn't have just a common cold. He's really sick, like he's about to die. This is serious. And Jesus' reaction is pretty interesting because it says that he decides to stay where he is for 2 more days. And then he ends up leaving and going to Bethany. Now in the later part of this story, we will see that Jesus comforts both Mary and Martha. Jesus comforts the sisters of Lazarus, both of them, but in different ways. Let's pick up the story back in verse 17 of chapter 11 and see how he first comforts Martha. Verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who's to come into the world. So let's stop right there. What is Martha asking for? What is she asking for? She says to Jesus, she says this, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. But she says this, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. I know that your will be done. I know that. That's what she says. She's asking for comfort. Martha's a very straightforward person. She's a logical thinker, kind of black and white thinker. She's not so much a feeler, more of a thinker. She kind of has an edge to her tone. She has a strong faith in Jesus. She says that she knows that in the end God's will be done and that all will be well. But she asks for an answer. She wants an answer. A logical answer for why she has to suffer, why this has to happen. And he gives her an answer, a comforting answer. Trust and believe in me and you will never die. He says, happy are those who mourn. This is how he comforts Martha. Now let's continue and see how Jesus comforts Mary. Picking back up in verse 28 of chapter 11. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn them. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. So in case you didn't know, Lazarus ends up raising from the dead later. Jesus brings him back to life. Spoiler, sorry. But Jesus ends up bringing him back to life. And so knowing how the story ends makes this a lot more interesting. Jesus knows what he's going to do. He knows he's going to raise Lazarus back to life. And yet he's crying. He's crying about it. Why? Verse 35, the shortest verse in the entire Bible. Jesus wept. 2 words. Jesus wept. People say when we face tragedy, they tell us to stay strong. You gotta be a strong person. Don't give in to your emotions. Don't cry. Be strong. But here Jesus is crying. He's crying. Weeping. This is such a necessary part of the story. Don't deny the mourning stage. Acknowledge how bad death hurts. So how come he didn't cry when he was talking to Martha? Because Jesus knew that's not what she needed. He knew what Martha needed, but he also knew what Mary needed. What's interesting, if you look at both of these accounts of Mary and Martha, you'll see a specific verse that sticks out that's repeated twice. They both say, Mary and Martha both say, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Followed by 2 different responses to them and Jesus. What's interesting is that notice how Jesus doesn't really say anything when he's with Mary. He's just there with her crying. When she says, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died, he just cries with her. He knows what she needs. He just cries with her and is with her. He's present with her. That's all she needed, was someone just to listen to her, just to support her. So many times when someone we love is hurting, we want to do something. But sometimes we just can't. Sometimes the best thing we can do is to just give them our attention and our presence. Whenever someone is mourning, don't just make them food and then bring it to them and leave. Make them food, bring it to them, and then eat it with them. Be with them. It takes so much more effort to give them that time. It's annoying. You feel like it's a waste of time. Like, oh, I don't have time for this. But it's so important to give them your presence, to show them that you actually care. Both Mary and Martha come to Jesus and want comfort. Jesus gives them both comfort in completely different ways. He gives Martha a logical response. He knows what she wants. Martha needed a conversation. She wanted an answer, a logical explanation for why she was suffering. And Mary just needed the time for mourning. And that's okay. Mary just wanted to have someone be with her. So when someone loses a loved one, don't say things like, God just wanted another angel in heaven. Don't say things like that. That's not helpful. There's 2 professors at Ozark who, a few years back, lost a child with a miscarriage. And she shared with me that the most painful part of the whole experience were just the things that people would say to her, the answers that they would give for why this had to happen. That's not what she needed. That's not what she needed. It's a part of our job to understand what someone needs. Because some will need an answer. Some will ask for an answer, and you should give them one. But some people don't need that. Some people just need your presence, and just someone to cry with. It's important. But what if it's not your neighbor who's mourning? What if it's not your friend that's mourning? But it's you. What if you're the one that's mourning? Because there's a healthy way to go about it, but that can be really hard to do. Normally there are 3 different ways that we tend to deal with grief and sorrow. The first way is to resent it. I can remember when my dad told me that he had cancer. And I ran upstairs and I slammed my door and I was angry. I became angry. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Why do I have to suffer? I resented it. Sometimes we can feel resentment that way, but I think one of the biggest ways that we can resort to resentment is when we feel that our pain was caused by someone else. It was caused by someone else. We see what we're dealing with right here, and then we see them out living their perfect lives, great lives, and we get angry. They deserve to feel what I feel. And so we start to feel resentment, and we try to get back at them. We try to plan something. How can they understand how I'm feeling, how they made me feel? walked into a pet store, and she asked the man behind the counter, "I want the nastiest, meanest pet you have." And so we got up and walked her to the back of the store, and he pointed to this blue bird that was in a cage. And he said, "This here is an attack bird." She said, "Okay, what can it do?" And so he takes it out of the cage, and he says, "Attack bird, the chair." And the bird flew and attacked the chair, and it just went into sawdust. It was amazing. It just got destroyed. And she's like, "Wow, that's amazing. What else can it do?" And so he says, "Okay, attack bird, the table." And so it went over, and the same thing happened to the table. It just got destroyed. She said, "Perfect, I'll take it." And the man asked her, what would you need this for? Why do you want this? And the woman said, "I'm married to the most cruel, sarcastic, awful person ever. And I know whenever I get home today, I'm going to say, 'Look at here, I got a bird.' And he's going to say, 'What in the heck is that?' And I'm going to say, 'It's an attack bird.' And he's going to say, 'Attack bird my butt.'" Only maybe he didn't use that word. If you handle your brokenness in your mourning with resentment, it will turn on you. Resentment will begin to eat you up. Resentment is one way we can handle with mourning. But the second way we deal with it is we replay it. Some people, when they have something awful happen to them, or something awful that they did, or something embarrassing happen to them, they'll just replay and relive the moment and the feelings over and over. Understand that there's a big difference between mourning and moaning. Mourning is a legitimate grief. Jesus did say, "Blessed are those who mourn." You're supposed to go through the mourning stage, natural. But you can't stay there forever. You can't stay in the mourning stage forever. But sometimes people will just sit and wallow in their grief and their sadness. They'll just have a pity party and say, "Woe is me, I'm no good, poor me." My best friend Chris recently had a rough breakup with his girlfriend, but they were dating for over a year. So it was a little different than my 7th grade story. And it was really rough for him to get over. They were starting to talk about engagement and future, and she broke it off kind of unexpectedly. And man, he just would wallow in his grief. He would lay in bed all day and just replay the moments that they had together, and it would destroy him. It would make him so sad. And it's been a difficult role to try to help him to get over that. Mourning stages is necessary to get over it, but you can't stay there. You can't just sit there and replay it over and over. And finally, the last way that we handle with our mourning and grief is we repress it. We just push it down, we just swallow it and act like it's not there. Some people take pills, some people drink to numb the pain, to numb the guilt. Some people sleep all day to try to avoid experiencing reality. Some people become workaholics to avoid the pain. Let me just say that this is such an unhealthy way to deal with grief. Brokenness. It's so unhealthy to think somehow just avoiding it, it'll go away. It's just how we should deal with reality. Reality is meant to be dealt with. But what we're really good at is repressing the brokenness over our sin. We repress something bad that we've done, and we hide it because of our shame. We live in this prison of pride, and we build a wall of self-assurance around our hearts and try to deny that we've messed up. It's the couple whose relationship is eroding away daily. Each of them is saying, it's not my fault. It's the addict or alcoholic who's destroying themselves but won't admit that they have a problem. It's the person dealing with a deep sin struggle, and instead of dealing with it, compares themselves to others. And says, "Oh, well, I'm not that person. I'm not that bad." It's the man who won't confess the huge financial hole he's dug, even though it's beginning to crash down on him. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who know they're in trouble and have sense enough to admit it." Happy are those who don't repress their grief. So if I shouldn't resent my grief, if I should replay my grief, and I should repress my grief, what the heck am I supposed to do with my grief? What am I supposed to do with it? Release it. Release it to God. This is what Jesus is talking about in the Sermon on the Mount. Happy are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. He's saying, let God enter in this with you. Let him in. Let him help you. Release it to him. Don't hold it in. Mourning is a critical point for everyone who wants to be happy forever. Because you don't come to God unless you recognize you need him. Brokenness and mourning always draws back to God. Whether that be our health or losses or sin. Now when we talk about sin, you can do two things with it. You can confess it to someone. You can tell someone about it. Or you can just kind of hold it in and keep it to yourself. You can repress it. And if you choose the second option, let me tell you, it will eat you alive. The summer of my freshman year, I did a thing called Camp Teens for Ozark Christian College, is what I go to, where you go around to different camps all summer. And so I went to 8 different camps over the course of the summer. And man, I will never forget the third week. We were somewhere outside of Jefferson City, Missouri, at this middle school camp. There's like 100 middle schoolers here. And one evening, it was Wednesday evening, and the evening session was about to start, and so all the kids were outside playing, and what they would do, they would sound a horn to kind of let everyone know like they're supposed to come in. And so I was outside, and I was just walking around, making sure everyone was getting where they're supposed to. And off in the distance, I see this kid, and he's laying under a tree. He's just sitting there, and his head's down. And so I decided to go up and see what's wrong. And so I start to go up, and this other camp counselor comes with me, who's in high school. He's like in 12th grade. And actually, it turns out that this counselor that walks up with me is actually this kid's brother. He's his brother. And so me and his brother walk up to him and see what's wrong, and he's just laying there, and his head's down, and he's crying. He's deeply crying. So we're just trying to figure out what's wrong, man. Like, why are you crying? And he just kept saying, I just want my sins to be forgiven. I just want God to forgive me for what I've done. And me and his brother just try to tell him, like, yes, you are forgiven. Your sins are forgiven. No matter what you've done, like, he will forgive you. And he says, you don't understand. You don't know what I did. And we're just like, no matter what you did, no matter what happened, I mean, you're forgiven. And his brother pipes up and he says, I mean, yeah, no matter what you've done, no matter how bad it is, he'll forgive you. I mean, it's not like you did something awful. Like, it's not like you killed someone. And then he looks up and he looks at him and he says, but I did. And me and this kid just look at each other like, what? And so we're just like, explain, what are you talking about? And he starts to tell us this story. But whenever he was like 6 years old, there was a neighborhood friend that he played with all the time. They were really close. And one day they decided to go play Minecraft. They wanted to go pretend like they were mining. And so they went to this dig site, this like construction site with a lot of dirt. And they picked up this broken piece of rebar, this little metal rod, and they kind of were pretending that it was like a pickaxe in this video game called Minecraft. And something happened, and his friend made him mad. And so he threw the piece of rebar at him, and it hit him in the head, and he got knocked out, and there's blood everywhere, so he freaked out, and he ran home. And he never saw his friend again. And so he just thought to himself, I killed this kid. I killed my friend. And he was telling us this, and his brother said, no, wait, I remember this happening. I remember they found this kid. They found him the next day laying in this dirt with blood everywhere, and they rushed him to the hospital, and he survived. He ended up being okay. He survived, but the thing was, he moved away a week later, and he never saw him again. So it makes sense for this little kid, this 6-year-old, to just kind of logically come to the conclusion, well, I guess he's dead. I killed him. So for the past 6 years, this 12-year-old kid has been living under the pressure of thinking that he's a murderer. Guys, I can't even explain just the look of his face whenever his brother told him that he didn't actually murder him. You could physically see the weight just lift off his shoulders, like, what? Really? And he just cried of sheer relief because he admitted this deep, dark sin in his life. And it ended up not being that bad at all. And you know what's cool? It's that the next day he got baptized. I will never forget that camp. I will never forget that day. I will never forget that boy. Release whatever you're holding inside of you. It will make you feel so much better, I promise. God will comfort you because he loves you. He knows your situation. He wants to help you. But you just have to let him in. You just have to let him in. The world tells us that we shouldn't be in touch with reality. We're supposed to escape reality with drugs and alcohol. We're supposed to numb reality to make it easier. But that's not the way of the upside-down kingdom. The upside-down kingdom tells us that reality is meant to be dealt with. Go through the struggle of mourning. Go through the struggle of confession and grief because it's worth it. Because you will be blessed. Because you will be happy. And that is the way of the upside-down kingdom. Let's pray. Lord, I pray for those that are going through mourning right now. I pray that they would seek others in their family and their community, and ultimately they would seek you for comfort and guidance in that. I pray that whatever we're going through right now, whether it's loss or sin or a struggle in our life, that we would openly confess it to others. And thank you just for being our comforter. Thank you so much for comforting us in our pain and in our mourning and in our loss. It's your name I pray. Amen.